the time of recording, is a Memorial Day, especially in Israel, that calls a day to mark the departure and expulsion of Jewish people from the Arab countries and Iran, commemorating, let's say, approximately 850,000 Jews from Arab and Muslim lands during the 20th century. And I think particularly after the 1947 UN partition plan, it was chose to symbolically follow November 29th, when the UN partition plan for Palestine was adopted, which obviously led to increased hostility and pressure on Jewish communities in Arab countries. So we're going to speak about this today. I don't know if this will be a 1 or 2 part series or maybe even more, but it's an important time, let's just say, to speak about this in of itself. I think large-scale migrations were organized, sponsored, and facilitated, let's just say, by various organizations, which has been, obviously, it happened at the time period of 1948 to 1970s. Many people would leave because they wanted to leave also. We have to point that out also. So that's, but there's a lot to speak about in detail. Many people felt forced to leave those various countries. We see there was very large communities in various different countries. Also, I'm using Wikipedia as a source over here as we are going to speak about it. Now, let's get a bit of background now to this entire topic. And how did various different communities come originally into the Arab lands? Okay, I think it was at the time of the Muslim conquest of the 7th century. Jewish communities had existed in many parts of the Middle East and North Africa. Jews under Islamic rule were given the status of something called the dhimmi, I believe it was, a non-Muslim living in an Islamic state, along with Christians and certain, let's say, other pre-Islamic religious groups. There's a historian, someone named Mark Cohen, I think an American scholar, a Jewish history in the Muslim world, characterized the dhimmi status as a kind of citizenship, second class and unequal though it was. In spite that, let's say, some Jewish people would achieve prominent positions in economy, in government service, and in medicine, respectively. Jewish people were occasionally subjected to persecutions and various pressures to convert to Islam, as we see in many countries. We spoke about the Mashhadi Jewish community in a separate video on various occasions over here. Now, during waves of persecution in medieval Europe, many Jews found refuge in Muslim lands. So, though in other times and places, Jews would flee persecution in Muslim lands and found refuge in Christian lands. So unfortunately, both places, there was discrimination. I think there was Jews that were expelled, obviously, from the Iberian Peninsula. They would actually come inside the Ottoman Empire. Now, we've spoken about that on various occasions here on this series, the Spanish Inquisition, respectively. Friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring 30th of November, marks the date of let's just say, the fleeing of many of the Jews from the Arab lands. And please subscribe to the channel. We've got fantastic content over here. So now let's go. We're really speaking about 20th century, and obviously there's a build-up in the 19th century. So let's speak a bit about what happened in North Africa. I think it was in the 19th century, the Francization of Jews in French colonial North Africa. There was work of organizations. Obviously, we've spoken about the Alliance Israélite Universelle on various occasions. There's French policies such as the Algerian citizenship, let's just say, decree in 1870. This was a result in the separation of community from local Muslims. France began its conquest in Algeria in 1830. I think the following century had huge influence on the status of Algerian Jews. Come what 1870, there was a Crémieux decree. They were elevated from the protected minority, dhimmi status, to French citizens all of a sudden, and we've spoken about this before. The decree began, let's say, a wave of pied noir-led anti-Jewish protests, such as the 1897 anti-Jewish riots in Oran, I think, which, let's say, the Muslim community did not participate in. Obviously, the European, let's just say, agitators would have wished that that would have been the case, but it didn't actually take place at that point in time. And there were, in 1934, where unfortunately 34 Jewish people lost their lives. There was a neighboring Hussein de Tunisia, began to come under European influence in the late 1860s, and became a French protectorate. I think it was come out 1881, and I think in 1837, the accession of Ahmed Bey, who we've spoken about before, I think in this series, continued by his successor Mohammed Bey. Tunisia's Jewish community were elevated within Tunisian society with, let's say, improved freedom, security, which was safeguarded during the French protectorate. Around a third of Tunisian, let's say, Jews took French citizenship during, let's say, this protectorate at that point in time. So let's speak about Morocco. Morocco remained independent during the 19th century. It became a French protectorate in 1912. And I think it was during less than half a century of colonization, the equilibrium between Jews and Muslims in Morocco, let's say, was upset, you could use that terminology. The Jewish community was again positioned between the colonizers and the Muslim majority. There was French penetration into Morocco, I think especially in the early part of the 20th century, which created significant Morocco Muslim resentment, resulting in nationwide protests, military unrest. I think there was a period of anti-European or anti-French protests, which would extend to include anti-Jewish manifestations. This would take place, I think, in areas like Fez, Oujda, Casablanca, come on, 1907, 1908-ish. And later in 1912, there was a famous documented Fez riots at that point in time. The situation in colonial Libya was also similar in North Africa. There was Italian influence in Libya. It was welcomed by the Jewish community at that point in time and increased the separation, let's just say, from the non-Jewish Libyans. The Alliance Israeli Universal was founded, I think, in France in 1860. They would set up schools, as we've spoken before, in Algeria, in Morocco, and in Tunisia, I think as early as the year 1863. I recommend everyone to look at that video we recorded with regards to Alliance Israelite Universal School System over there. Now, friends, anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community. We are exploring the history over here within regards to what actually took place during the exodus of the in that specific era in of itself, of the Jewish people from the Muslim countries, something that we've spoken about on various occasions before here inside this series. So welcome to our channel, anyone tuning in live, and please also subscribe at the moment, and we'll really appreciate it over here. So welcome everyone to the community, and yeah, please, we'll really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and join at the moment. Okay, so let's continue speaking over here within regards to we've been speaking about the North African countries, how those areas specifically was affected. Now let's talk about the Second World War time period, because that was a key time period where a lot did actually take place at that stage time in the Second World War. I think Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya came unfortunately under Nazi or the Vichy French occupation, and their Jews were subject to various forms of persecution. I think it was in Libya, for example, Axis powers established labor camps, it was reported over, to which many Jews were forcibly deported. I think in other areas, let's say, of Nazi propaganda targeted Arab populations, they incited them against British and French rule. A national socialist propaganda contributed to the transfer of racial anti-Semitism to the Arab world, and I think is likely to have, let's say, unsettled Jewish communities. There was, let's say, at that point in time, anti-Jewish riot that took place in Casablanca, come out in the year 1942, I believe it was, in the wake of Operation Torch, I believe it was. So that's very interesting. I think a local mob, unfortunately, attacked the Jewish Mellah. I think Mellah is a word inside the Jewish ghetto, respectively, over there. And according to Hebrew University of Jerusalem, someone named Dr. Haim Saadon, he said relatively good ties between Jews and Muslims in North Africa during the Second World War stand in stark contrast to the treatment of their co-religionists by Gentiles in Europe. That's what he states over. Now, I think it was come what 1943 until mid-1960s, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee was, let's say, a very essential foreign, let's say, body driving a change, more modernization in North African Jewish community. And I think he had initially become involved in the region whilst carrying out relief work, especially during the Second World War, respectively. Let's speak about Morocco now over here. And I think in due course, we are going to come inside and explore what actually took place at that point in time. This could be a 2 or 3 parts, maybe even 4-part series over here, but I think it's very much important we get a good breadth over here within regards to the history of actually went on to do this justice. So migration of anyone tuning in live, please welcome to our channel, and please subscribe to our community, to our channel now. We've got fantastic, important content here. The migration of Moroccan Jews to Israel was sponsored, facilitated and administrated by, I think, various different organizations. I think Zionistic organizations. There was through the Kadima, I think, in 1949 to 1956, Operation Yachin between 1961 to 1964. And let's just say Tunisia, Algeria, Moroccan Jews did not face large-scale expulsion or outright asset confiscation or any similar government persecution during the period of exile. Let's just say, I think various Zionistic agents were relatively allowed freedom of action to encourage immigration also, I think, at that point in time. So in Morocco, I think the Vichy regime during the Second World War passed discriminatory laws against Jews, so we can see agitation of it. For example, Jewish people were no longer able to get any form of credit. Jewish people who had homes or businesses in European neighborhoods were expelled. So there was expulsion of it. There were quotas imposed, limiting the percentage of Jewish people allowed to practice professions such as law and medicine to no more than 2%. So you can see there's limitations. You know, many people don't want to live in these countries where all these laws and rules are put upon them, notably. So King Mohammed, I think V, expressed his personal distaste for these laws, assuring Moroccan Jewish leaders that he would never lay a hand upon either their persons or properties while there is no concrete evidence of him and taking any action to defend the Moroccan Jewish people. I think some will argue that he had may have worked on their behalf behind the scenes, so that's pointed out. But how great is it actually when all these things? I think it was June 1948, soon after Israel was established, and in the midst of the first Arab-Israel war, violent anti-Israel Jewish riots would break out in Oujda and in Jirada, I believe. Death of 44 Jews, I think, would come about at that point in time. So, this makes living there unbearable, you could also say. I think Jewish immigration from Morocco slowed to a few thousand a year. And I think originally 18,000 Moroccan Jews left the country for Israel, but then I think it will dwindle quite a bit. Following Moroccan independence in 1956, a new wave of Moroccan Jews emigrated from the country towards South America, also not just Israel, also France and Spain. So you can see there was, this was one of the causes of it. The Kadima, the KC to 8, Aux, immigrants, Moroccans, and Kadima was clandestine, let's just say. I think there was a Zionistic apparatus that arranged and oversaw the mass migration of Moroccan Jews to Israel from 1949 to 1956 during the years of French colonial rule in Morocco. I think Kadima was administrated by the Jewish Agency and Mossad al-Aliyah. There was other agents, I think, Israel, that would help from local Moroccan Zionists. And I think it was actually based from Casablanca, if I'm not mistaken. They would operate cells in large cities, as well as a transit camp, I think, and from which Jewish migrations could depart. And I think they would go via Marseille to Israel, if I'm not mistaken. I think through the early 1950s, Zionistic organizations encouraged immigration, particularly in the poorer south of the country, seeing Moroccan Jews as potentially very valuable contributors to the Jewish state, respectively. I think Yehuda Grinke is actually quoted over here on Wikipedia. Incidents, let's say, of anti-Jewish violence would continue in the 1950s. I think French officials later stated that Moroccan Jews had suffered comparatively fewer troubles than the wider European population during the struggle for independence. But you can see still a lot of troubles taking place over here. So it just shows how much worse it was everywhere else. 1953, in August, there will be riots breaking out in Oujda, and this will result in the death of 4 Jews, including an 11-year-old girl at that point in time. And I think French security forces, I think it was around the same period in the same month, prevented a mob from breaking into a Jewish Mellah of Rabat in 1954, a nationalistic event in the town of Petit Jean, I think, turned into an anti-Jewish riot and resulted in the death of 6 Jewish merchants from Marrakesh. And 1955, another story. A mob will break out in the Jewish Mellah, I think Mazagan this time, and caused 1,700 Jewish residents to flee to the European quarters of the city. So this was real agitation. The house of 200 Jewish people were badly damaged. And during the riots, let's say, for them to return, in 1954, I think the Mossad had established an undercover base in Morocco, sending agents and emissaries within a year to appraise the situation, organize continuous immigration. The operations were composed of 5 branches: self-defense, information, intelligence, illegal immigration, establishing contact, and public relations. I think, very interesting enough. So friends, anyone tuning in live, the 30th of November marks the date. Many people, places would mark the date of the expulsion of the Jewish people from the Arab Muslim countries. 850,000 approximately had to leave. That's was reported over, if I'm not mistaken. So, huge amount of people, and we are commemorating it today. Many people would, and very important to come out. So please, everyone, if you're new to the channel, new to the community, subscribe to our channel. We do a lot of very important contents over here, let's just say, and join our community at the moment. Welcome if this is the first time over here, and feel free to browse the channel and all the different importances in of itself. Okay, so let's continue over here. Jewish immigration to Israel would jump, I think, in 1954 from 8,171 to 24,994 in 1955. It will increase further in 1956. I think 60,000 Jews would immigrate, and come on 7th of April 1956, the Morocco attained independence. Jewish people occupied several political positions, including 3 parliamentary seats and cabinet position of the minister of post. However, I think there was a minister, Leon Ben Zaken, who was a Moroccan doctor and was a personal doctor for King Mohammed V, if I'm not mistaken, did not survive the first cabinet reshuffling, and no Jewish person was appointed again to a cabinet position. Although I think there was relations with the Jewish community at the highest levels of government were cordial, these attitudes were not necessarily shared, let's say, in the lower ranks, and exhibited attitudes that ranged from traditional contempt to outright hostility. Morocco's increasing identification with the Arab world and pressure on Jewish educational institutions, let's say, to Arabize and conform culturally, added to fears of Moroccan Jews at that point in time. So you can see there was a vast amount of anti-Semitism over there. I think it was between 1956 to 1961, immigration to Israel was prohibited now by law. So this caused, and a further, I think, 18,000 Jews left Morocco at that stage in time. I think 10th of January 1961, there was a Egos, a Mossad leased ship that would carry Jews attempting to immigrate undercover, would sink off the northern coast of Morocco. According to Tad Souk, the Miskeret commander in Morocco, someone named Alex Gatamon decided to precipitate, let's say, a crisis on the back of the tragedy, and Mossad director Isser Harel, the scenario, he actually describes a wedge had to be forced between the royal government and the Moroccan Jewish community, and anti-Hassan nationalists had to be used as leverage, as well as if a compromise over immigration was ever to be attained. I think there was a pamphlet also agitating for illegal immigration, supposedly by some people say an Zionistic organization. It was printed by the Mossad and distributed throughout Morocco, which will cause the government, let's say the terminology Wikipedia use is hit the roof. These events prompted King Mohammed V to allow Jewish immigration. Over the 3 following years, more than 70,000 Moroccan Jews would leave the country. There was Operation Yachin, which we'll speak about in a minute. In June 1961, it was, a report surfaced regarding the continued removal of Jewish officials from permanent positions within the Moroccan government. So you can see it was not easy for Jewish people to stay over there at that stage in time. And I think there's that very much is. Let's speak about Operation Yachin. What was that over here? Operation Yachin was fronted by the New York-based Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, who financed approximately 15 million of the costs. Now, I think HIAS provided an American cover for underground Israeli agents in Morocco, whose functions included organizing immigration, arming of Jewish Moroccan communities for self-defense and negotiations with the Moroccan government. Comot 1963, the Moroccan Interior Minister, someone named Colonel Ofkir, and the Mossad chief at the time, Mayor Amit, agreed to swap Israeli training of Moroccan security services and some covert, let's just say, military assistance for intelligence on Arab affairs and continued Jewish immigration. It was, I think, come on 1967, only 50,000 Jews remained. Now, 67, before we talk about the Six-Day War in 1967, just a welcome note to everyone in this community. If you're new over here, you're just tuning in live now, welcome. At the moment, we're a community, we're exploring Jewish history, especially from all the, let's say, Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, and so on and so forth. We are exploring what actually went on over there. Happens to be 30th of November, marking the expulsion of the Jews from Arab Muslim countries, and where many had to flee and go to various other countries also. And we happen to be speaking about this today. So please, everyone, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel now and join. And we've got very informative content over here. That's something I would say from the outset. And once again, welcome everyone if you are new over here. We are community, and we very value everyone that comes and joins. So once again, please subscribe and you'll get a lot of the benefits. Okay, so let's continue talking about Operation Yachin. So we're in the middle of speaking about it. 1967, obviously at that point in time, would lead to Arab-Jewish tensions worldwide. This would also be in Morocco. A significant Jewish immigration out of the country continued. Come at the early 1970s, the Jewish population in Morocco will only be 25,000 people. Most of the emigrants went to France, Belgium, Spain and Canada rather than Israel at that point in time. So Israel would not get as many. Someone named called Esther Ben Bassa. She is a Turkish, sorry about that, Turkey, Israeli, French historian and politician. So she really specializes between the Jews and other minorities. I think she says the migration of Jews from North African countries was prompted by uncertainty about the future. Obviously, uncertainty when you see anti-Semitism. And in 1948, 250,000 to 265,000 Jews lived in Morocco. Come what 2001, we're going forward a bit, only 24 years ago, only 5,230 Jewish people remain. So you can see, and despite, let's say, dwindling numbers, Jewish people even still play a notable role in Morocco. The king retains a Jewish senior advisor, someone, I think currently Andre Azulay, if I'm not mistaken, and there's Jewish schools and synagogues will receive government subsidies, I think modern day over here. But Jewish people are still attacked. I think more recently, in 2003, there was bombing attacks on the Jewish community center in Casablanca. It's reported over. Tens of thousands of Israeli Jews with Moroccan heritage visit Morocco every year, especially around Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. It's reported over. And very, very interesting. Now, we're going to speak about Algeria now, friends, over here on the special edition over here, where it's going to be a few-part series. This is where, because as we stated before, 30th of November is a historic day. It's marked as a day where we commemorate the exodus of the Jewish community from various different places, Arab Muslim countries, over the last, let's just say, since 1948, respectively. So very, very important, very informative. We'll try and keep this as informative as possible. Over here. Okay, so let's continue over here. Well, we're talking about Algeria now, we happen to be speaking about. Okay, as in Tunisia and Morocco, Algerian Jews did not face, let's just say, such large-scale expulsion or outright asset confiscation or similar government persecution during the period of exile, and there were Zionistic agents were allowed, once again, some form of freedom of action to encourage immigration. Jewish immigration for Algeria was part of a wider ending of French colonial control and related social, economic, and cultural changes. The Israeli government were successful in encouraging Morocco and Tunisian Jews to emigrate to Israel, but were less so apparently reported over in Algeria. I think there were visa, economic subsidies. Only 580 Jews moved from Algeria to Israel between 1954 to 1955, which was relatively small. Immigration would peak, I think, during the Algerian War, during which thousands of Muslims, Christians, and Jews left the country. This was in 1954 to 1962, particularly the Pied Noir community. And in 1956, Mossad agents once again worked underground to organize and arm the Jews of Constantine, who comprised approximately half the Jewish population of the country at that point in time. In Oran, a Jewish counter-insurgency movement was thought to have been trained by former members of the Irgun, which was heavily reported over. I think, yeah, so there was the Algerian Revolution would intensify. I think around the 1950s onward, most of Algeria's 140,000 Jews began to leave. The community had lived mainly in Algiers and in Blida, Constantine, and Oran. I think between 1961 to summer of 1962, 130,000 of Algeria's approximately 140,000 Jews would leave for France at that point in time over there, while about 10,000 of them would emigrate to Israel. So you could see France would get huge amounts of people compared to Israel, which is quite, you could say quite surprising to some specific degree at that point in time. So I think between the repatriation represents a unique case in the history of Jewish migration, given that even though they were psychologically uprooted, they returned to France as citizens and not as refugees. The Great Synagogue of Algiers was consequently abandoned in 1994. Now, hopefully we are going to speak about the Jewish community over there and the various different synagogues. We will do a video, hopefully at one stage, with regards to history of Algerian Jewry over here. I think that's a very, very important topic for us to speak about, friends, over here. Okay, so Jewish migration from North Africa to France led to a rejuvenation of the French Jewish community, which is now, I think, the third largest Jewish community in the world. Now, friends, we are going to speak now about Tunisia. Tunisia, another place, as obviously in Morocco and Algeria, Tunisian Jews did not face, let's say, large, relatively scale expulsion or outright asset confiscation. Remember, it wasn't all the bed of roses over there also. And 1948, approximately 105,000 Jews lived in Tunisia. I think about only 1,500 Jewish people reported to remain there today, which is much, much lower figure than, let's just say, many people would imagine. I think mostly people live in Tunis, Zarzis, and in Jerba, respectively. Remember, these are places where we've spoken about many, many great rabbis of yesteryear on various occasions before, which I have to strongly recommend everyone to watch over. Okay, so following Tunisia's independence from France in 1956, immigration of the Jewish population to Israel and France would accelerate. There were attacks in 1967. Jewish immigration both to Israel and France will accelerate. There was also attacks in 1982, 1985. Obviously, this was following Israel's Operation Wooden Leg. And most certainly, recently in 2002, there was unfortunately a bombing in Jerba, which would take 21 lives, most of them German tourists near the local synagogue. A terrorist attack, which was reportedly claimed by Al-Qaeda over here. Everyone that's tuning into our channel and our community, welcome at the moment. We are a community. We're exploring the history of various different countries. And it's at the moment today we're marking the 30th of November, the date when, let's just say, happens to be where the expulsion of the Jews from Arab countries, Muslim countries, would actually be marked, commemorated. And let's say there was about nearly 850,000 approximately Jewish people that were expelled or forced to some degree leave the various different Muslim countries and would have to flee at that time. And that's something very important that we have to point out. So anyone that is new and you're tuning in live, you've just come across our channel, first of all, welcome, and please subscribe to the channel. And we've got fantastic content over here where we are exploring various different history of rabbis from various different countries also, and so much great content over here. So welcome everybody, as we will explore more today, and we are going to continue speaking. Now, we've spoken about Tunisia within regards to that. Now we are going to speak about Libya, what actually went on there. There's someone named Maurice Roumani. He was a Libyan immigrant, I believe, who was previously the executive director of something called the WOJAC, which stands for the World Organization of Jews from Arab Countries, respectively. So what's he going to say over here? He says important things. He says the most important factors that influence the Libyan Jewish community that stage in time to emigrate were the scars left from the last years of the Italian occupation and the entry of the British military in 1943, which was accompanied by the Jewish Palestinian soldiers, which is reported over. I think there were Zionistic emissaries, shlichim, which began arriving in Libya in the late 1940s with intention to transform the community and transfer it to Eretz Israel, to Palestine. In 1943, Mossad Le'aliyah Bet began to send emissaries to prepare the infrastructure for immigration of the Libyan Jewish community. It was, I think, 1942, German troops fighting allies in North Africa will occupy the Jewish quarter of Benghazi and plunder shops, deport more than 2,000 Jews across the desert. They would send to work in labor camps like in Giado. More than 1/5 of the group of Jews perished. At that time, most Libyan Jews, I think, lived in Tripoli and Benghazi. There were smaller numbers in Beida and in Misrata. And there was an Allied victory at the Battle of El Agheila, I think in December 1942. German, Italian troops were driven out of Libya. The British assigned as garrison in Cyrenaica and in Palestine Regiment. And this, let's say, unit would later become the core of the Jewish Brigade, which was later stationed, let's just say, in Tripolitania. I think there was pro-Zionist soldiers encouraged the spread of Zionism throughout the local population, it's reported over. There was a liberation of North Africa by Allied forces, and there was unfortunately more anti-Semitic incidents which would become widespread. The most severe racial violence between the start of World War II and the establishment of Israel would erupt in Tripoli in November 1945. It was a period of several days. More than 140 Jewish people, reported over, were killed, hundreds injured, 36 children, I believe, lost their lives, 4,000 were displaced, 2,400 were reduced to poverty. 5 synagogues in Tripoli and 4 in provincial towns were destroyed, and over 1,000 Jewish residents and commercial buildings were plundered in Tripoli alone. Someone named Gil Scheffler writes, as awful as a pogrom in Libya was, it was a relatively isolated occurrence compared to the mass murders of Jews by locals in Eastern Europe. The same year, I think violent anti-Jewish violence occurred in Cairo, which would result in close to a dozen victims also. So that's very, very interesting. So what happened in 1948? I think come on 1948, 38,000 Jewish people would live in Libya. The pogroms would continue in June 1948. 15 were killed. Jewish people, 280 Jewish homes destroyed. So you can see it's unbearable over here. This is proper terrible what happened. And in November 1948, a few months after the events in Tripoli, the American consul in Tripoli, Ore Taft Jr., reported that there is reason to believe that the Jewish community has become, let's just say, been caused devastation to some specific degree, but it quotes him more aggressive as a result of the Jewish victories in Palestine. So there was more confidence among the Jewish people that at that point in time because of what actually occurred in 1948, the miracles at that point in time. And the community was would receive some sort of guidance from the land of Israel, according to historians. And did that make a change in attitude? That's one of the things. Even there was aggressiveness, I think, at a point in time. And very interesting. Immigration to Israel began in 1949. There was the establishment of Jewish Agency for Israel office in Tripoli. And I think a number of Libyan Jews, I think it was reported over, believed that the Jewish Agency was maybe behind the riots. Possibly it's most likely untrue, but the theories always come about. I can't say everything is for sure one way or the other. Another. Between the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and Libyan independence in December 1951, over 30,000 Libyan Jews emigrated to Israel. Very interesting. 31st of December 1958, the President of the Executive Council of Tripolitania ordered the dissolution of the Jewish Community Council and the appointment of a Muslim commissioner nominated by the government. I think there was a specific law that was made in 1961 would require Libyan citizenship for the possession and transfer of property in Libya. This was a requirement, if I'm not mistaken, met by only 6 Libyan Jews. Jews were apparently banned from voting, attaining public offices, and from serving in the army and police, according to Wikipedia. Now, before we explore the 6-day war over here, within regards to the Libyan community, I'm just going to take a short 1 or 2 minute break over here. So please, everyone, just be patient, and we're going to continue this video. Anyone, if you are tuning in live, please welcome to our community over here. And yeah, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, that's something that just a short request I have for everybody. So I'm going to come back in a minute, and then we will continue again within regards to this specific class. So in the meantime, yeah, maybe if you're just tuning in live, you can just watch over what we said just several minutes ago. Okay, shalom everyone. Thanks for having the patience just to wait over here. Sorry about the long break. And we're going to continue speaking about the Jewish exodus from the Muslim lands. And I don't know how many more minutes we've got at the moment, but yeah. So we're talking about 1967, during the 6-day war. The Jewish population of over, let's just say, 4,000, this was in Libya, was subjugated to riots in which 18 Jewish people reported over were killed and many more were injured. There was a pro-Western Libyan government of King Idris, I believe, tried unsuccessfully to maintain law and order. And come on June the 17th, 1967, Lilo Arbib, leader of the Jewish community in Libya, sent a formal request to the Libyan Prime Minister Hussein Mazik, requesting that the government allow Jewish people desiring, let's just say, to leave the country for a time until tempers cool, and the Libyan population, let's say, said understood the position of Libyan Jews who, let's say, had been continued to be loyal to the state in of itself. There was someone named David Harris, executive director of the Jewish advocacy organization, the AJC, says the Libyan government, faced with a complete breakdown of law and order, urged Jewish people to leave the country temporarily, permitting them each to take one suitcase and the equivalent of $50 through an airlift and the aid of several ships. Over 4,000 Libyan Jews were evacuated to Italy by the Italian Navy, where they were assisted by the Jewish Agency for Israel. Of the Jews evacuated, 1,300 would immigrate to Israel, 2,200 would remain in Italy, and the rest would go to the United States. And scores, let's say, remained in Libya. Some Libyan Jews, I think, let's say, had been evacuated temporarily, returned to Libya, I think, between 67 and 69, and they would try to get back their lost property. So there was a lot of lost property involved over here. In September 1967, only 100 Jews remained in Libya, failing to less than 45 years later, in 1972, and then there was only 16 Jews in 1977. So you can see how Libya really got reduced totally, the Jewish community. And in 21st of July, 1970, the Libyan government issued a law which confiscated assets of the Jews who had previously left Libya. You can see the discrimination here and the theft, let's just say, of the confiscation of assets of Jewish community over there. Issuing in their stead 15-year bonds. However, when the bonds matured in 1985, no compensation was paid. The Libyan leader, this is according to Wikipedia, someone named Muammar Gaddafi, later justified this on grounds that the alignment of the Jews with Israel, the Arab nation's enemy, has forfeited their right to compensation. Although there was a main synagogue in Tripoli, it was renovated in 1999, it wasn't open for services. I think in 2002, Esmeralda Naji, who had, I think, been one of the last Jews of Libya, had passed away. However, the same year, it was discovered that Rina Debach, I think we've spoken about it, an 80-year-old Jewish woman who was thought to be dead by her family in Rome, was still alive and living in a nursing home in the country. With a subsequent departure for Rome, there were no Jews reported over left in Libya. Israel is home to a significant Jewish population of Jews of Libyan descent who maintain obviously unique traditions. Jews of Libyan descent also make up a significant part of the Italian Jewish community. About 30% of the registered Jewish population of Rome is of Libyan origin over here. Now, I think we're going to, in a few minutes, call this a day over here. And I think in the next session, we're going to speak more about the Middle East. So we spoke about North Africa here today. It's going to be it looks like it's going to be a few part series. This is going to happen to be. That's something I have to point out over here, just from the, let's say, I have to point out here from the onset. Obviously, the day to mark the departure and expulsion of Jews from Arab countries and Iran is the 30th of November, which is today. The Knesset adopted the commemoration date into law on June 23rd, 2014. It was chosen that date in of itself. We explained why from the beginning. For many Mizrahi Jews in Israel, it's considered belated recognition of a collective trauma long ignored throughout the country's history. That's what I have to point out. I think May 9th, 2021, the first physical memorial for the day to mark the departure of the expulsion of Jews from Arab countries and Iran was placed by the Shurova Promenade in Jerusalem. And the memorial reads, for the birth of the State of Israel, over 850,000 Jews were forced from Arab lands and Iran. The desperate refugees were welcomed by Israel. That's what's actually reported over and written, I think, inside this specific place in of itself, respectively. So I'd recommend everyone to look more into that over here. And once again, it's always good to have a special edition over here and explore the life or what actually happened and recount this specific important but very sad episode of Jewish history. So that's very interesting, friends over here. Anyone tuning in live, we're a community here. Welcome to our channel, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel also. So that's something I point out. I think, yeah, it would also, I think there was Act of Knesset, 30th November, Annual Departure and Expulsion Memorial Day. Memorial donated by the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation with support from the World Sephardi Federation, City of Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem Foundation. I think there was a sculpture up there in the interpretive work of San Felipe, a 5th generation Jerusalemite, if I'm not mistaken. So, I'd recommend everyone to, there's so much to cite with regards to this specific, let's see, this specific entire episode in of itself. The World Organization of Jews from Arab Countries estimated in 2006 that Jewish property abandoned in Arab countries would be valued at more than $100 billion, later revising the estimate in 2007 to $300 billion. They also estimated Jewish-owned real estate left behind in Arab lands at 100,000 square kilometers, 4 times the size of the state of Israel, which is a very, very, flabbergasting. This is. So we talked about, the various different losses and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's a huge amount. So we will speak about in the next session over here. This is going to be a good few part series. So we're able to speak about the more the North African countries, there, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Morocco. Next time we're going to speak about the Middle East. We're going to concentrate on Iraq. What happened? There's so much to say with regards to Iraq. That's one thing I want to say. Egypt also, we're going to try and speak about. Yemen, and we'll see, maybe we'll be able to speak about Libya, Lebanon and Syria also inside this series. So yeah, very informative over here today, and very important. And please, everyone, subscribe to the channel. Welcome if you're new, and yeah, and check over the channel what we're doing. We're doing a lot of important things. We are not just looking at the history of various different countries of what actually took place. What we are also doing at the moment, we are recording about, let's just say, various different other importances that actually took place all over the world. We record biography videos of great rabbis. Yes, that's something that we have to point out. We also did record a video with regards to this specific topic, I believe 3 years ago, and put it on the channel, and I recommend everyone to actually look into that also. So that had yeah, that was, I believe, we also did a video, I think 2 years ago, also on this topic. So we've done several videos on this. It's not the first one by any means. That's something I would definitely stress out over here. So it's not the first video on this respectively, but yeah, very, very important that we're doing it. We're trying to do it on the specific time period where this has actually happened, and this was the date where there is a commemoration of what actually occurred there. So very, very interesting over here. Just researching something at the moment, so very, very important. And everyone, please, if you tuned in live for the first time, really welcome. We also here on this channel, we record videos on many importances, let's just say, in of itself. We do tours all over Israel, which I recommend everyone to actually watch those specific tours that we've recorded so far. We've recorded about 200 tours. We love exploring and looking at Israel and all the beauties with regards to it. And yeah, very, very important, friends, over here. It happens in Motzei Shabbat. We just came out of Parshat Vayetze. We're in incoming Shabbat is going to be Parshat Vayishlach this week. So watch this space. We will record, hopefully, a video on the Parshat Shavua. Another interesting project we are working on every day is a clip on the daily page of the Daf Yomi. That's another project that we're very, very much very proud about, let's just say, in of its own right. And yeah, how important it is that we're just going from strength to strength over here and really recording so much great content. It's very, very important. And yeah, if you descend, if you have watching this live and you do descend from one of these countries, which I've been speaking about, let me know more information if you've got any information. I'm always thirsting to hear more of what actually took place on those various different occasions, and how important actually it is to speak about it in general, and so on and so forth. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. and wishing you well. And please don't forget once again to subscribe to the channel and join our community. So thank you very much and have a great day, friends. Thank you.